It's How I Make Money with Andy Beadle. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. It's another episode of How I Make Money. Our guest this week is Ty Evans. In researching him, I have to say he's got the best nickname I've heard ever, the Sales Assassin, which I love. I think that's awesome, man. And you can find his consulting business at Tyzer, Tyzer Evans, EVANS.com. Hey, thanks for coming on today. I'm excited. We've had a couple of people who have a kind of a sales training background, but they've been very focused in a particular niche. So we had a great guest on a couple of weeks ago who worked with accountants to help them grow their business. But I'm excited to have somebody. I know you've got a lot of experience in a lot of verticals, so I'm really stoked to have somebody on board who's got a pretty deep bench as a actual productive salesperson who's also kind of doing some consulting work. So yeah, tell everybody and tell me a little bit about your background and how you decided to get started in the training game. I mean, that's a big transition to make from being on the line to being on the line for other people's success, right?
Yeah, right. So, well, I do both to clarify for everybody. But what I saw as a need, Andy, was like any good salesperson, I just fell right into it. It wasn't
Hmm.
obviously something that I sought out in college. It wasn't, hey, I'm going to be the sales assassin. Can you guys design me a degree for that? That wasn't. Although that would be cool.
That would be
That
cool.
wasn't
I mean,
something that. Yeah, exactly. That wasn't something that, I just, in college, I ended up selling surfboards and board shorts and got some really cool experience and won some sales awards. And I've always just enjoyed helping people and chatting with people. And as I got done with college, I realized that, probably wasn't going to be long term selling surfboards would be my future career. So then I went and rented cars for a couple years with my new college degree, working for Enterprise Rent a Car.
nice.
And that was a real. I'll tell you though, they do have the reputation for being a great company to work for, and they were. And that was a real
Oh, wow.
good
Great.
sales training boot camp for me. Brutal
Hmm.
work for 2 years, but I learned a lot. And then I hopped into insurance, and as I kind of now, like you said, there's different verticals: surfing, renting cars, and insurance. All
Right.
three very, very different things. And kind of what I saw was that most people struggle,
Hmm.
and I really kind of decided to, hey, there's the most highly paid people with generally with any organization, the salespeople. So I kind of
Yep.
gravitated towards that because it came natural. I can make a lot of money. And then I just, for me, just, the way I was in school and sports, I always just dig in. And my wife still to this day calls me an extremist to anything I do. And she's like, you just, whatever you do, you just go psycho on it. I
There
don't
you
know if
go.
it's a family thing because my brother's the same way. He's big into fly fishing and he ties his own ties. And it's a craft in its own. And so anyway, so long story short, I just honed in and how could I get better? How could I develop? And as I got better, I realized that there's no training amongst organizations, most organizations, even the ones, I've worked for 3 Fortune 500 companies,
Hmm.
and the training's scarce at
Right.
best.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so I saw this need to be able to help other people. So that's why I said I can do some one-on-one consulting, and small businesses had reached out to me that I worked with in an insurance capacity, but helping brokers and helping small businesses would get into
Hmm.
these different conversations. And so I said, yeah, sure. It'd be, I enjoy helping. It's a great another source of revenue. So that's kind of
Right.
where I'm at.
Well, and I think that's really true. I mean, it's funny, everybody I know in the sales game who's kind of made a living at it, either as a founder, where you're kind of doing the selling, or as a consultant, or even in a line job, always has some weird story about how they got started selling, right? It's like, oh, I sold surfboards and board shorts. I sold gray cars and aftermarket warranties when I was in, like when I got out of high school in Atlanta. And that's a market that doesn't exist anymore. People like, what's a gray car? It's like, yeah, you used to be able to buy a Beamer at the factory, put it on a boat, bring it to the U.S., put a catalytic converter on it, and sell it for 10,000 less on a model you couldn't get here. And I think once you get hooked on, I think a lot of people look at sales and go, oh, it's, sleazy and you're doing this. It's like the good salespeople I know. My uncle sold cheese for Land O'Lakes and butter for Land O'Lakes for 30 years. He just
Oh,
loves
wow.
people. It's about
Yeah.
finding a need, meeting a need, with your product, and you get to know people in your industry. And the salespeople I know who are really good at their jobs are pretty obsessively focused on helping their clients far more than they really kind of keep the, oh, here's my numbers and I mean, it's like, I want to have conversations, and then I want to learn to have conversations to help people get what they need. And surprisingly, you're right. There's not, they might send some people to a Sandler workshop or something like that, or a Carnegie thing, but there's not a whole lot of follow-up where I think, are helping people have these conversations. I think you absolutely hit on a need there. What does an engagement look like for you when you start working with somebody? How do you approach that?
Well, you got to figure out, try to meet them where they're at. So I try to really, as basic as it sounds, is have a clear understanding of what motivates somebody.
Mm-hmm.
So, when you're meeting with the individual reps, there's different levels to this, right? So it's different if you're working with the individual reps versus talking to someone who owns a business and starting to look at more their analytics and their metrics and whatnot. But when I start with just an average salesperson, if we're doing one-on-one consulting, it's trying to find out what really motivates you as a salesperson, because everybody has different drivers. And so with my teams that I've managed over the years, I've been kind of known as a fixer. I fixed 7 sales teams. The most recent one we fixed, we accomplished last year. I grew $10 million in the midst of COVID, and they were up 65%.
Wow.
And
well done, sir.
One of the ways
congratulations. Yeah, That's great. That's great.
Yeah, they were pumped. But one of the ways we do is we sit down and we assess, I always have people outline 3 to 5 personal and professional goals. So start to understand what are the motivators, how is this person driven? Because it's like, it's cliche, but there's no one style fits all management,
Right.
And so you got to understand where people are coming from. So that's one way is I sit down and I start to assess where the person's at. Then we got to go, okay, well, what's the sales process looks like?
Mm-hmm.
And let's break that out and make sure that the sales reps, frontline people understand exactly where they should be. Then we start to look at, okay, well, what are the metrics? What are the average closing ratios? What are the scripts we're using? And so you kind of start to dissect, maybe it's just they're using a wrong line within a script.
Right.
Tweak that one thing. It might include a closing ratio of 5%. But I really dig down. I'm very big into the metrics and the numbers. And then we can use that to align with people's goals. And this is where a lot of sales managers too, and like the last company I was just working for, they were like, hey, $80 a day. Okay. Well,
right.
That sounds good. But you know what I mean? One, not everybody needs to make $80 a day.
Right.
So again, you've got to tailor metrics to every single individual. When I was a rep, my rookie year, I was number 6 in the country. And my second year, I was number 1 in the country. I never made $80 a day ever because I didn't need to. Because I was having better, more impactful conversations. I was targeting people a different way by building out a sales sequence. So there's a lot that goes into it. And then we do that. And we start to look at, do you guys have a sales sequence? How many touches are you having within a quarter? And start to build out a bit of a funnel.
Well, in my experience, one thing that happens too is, we'll get to your T-shirt in a minute. For those listening at home who can't see, he's wearing a 75 hard T-shirt. Andy Frisella's awesome fitness and mental toughness challenge. So I know that you'll know this phrase too when I say this. I think a lot of salespeople struggle with the idea that these systems that you're talking about, scripts, dial counts, metrics, are really the framework that, like a Jocko Willink talks about, discipline equals freedom, right? Yeah. Because when that framework is in place and you've got the discipline of, dial, script, system, sequences, then you can free your mental energy to listen carefully to people and learn to have these discussions that are about meeting their need, right? We talk to clients all the time on the marketing side, and I tell them, hey, no one, like literally no one but you, even your team, nobody but you cares about your product. They just don't care. What they care about is what need does that product meet, and that need always has an emotional, psychological component, right? I mean, they could shop with anyone. Why did they come to you? And having that framework in place means you just put, not really on autopilot, but you don't have to think about it all the time. And instead, you can listen and go, oh, okay, this is where this conversation's going. How do I do this? How do I do that? My wife is a financial advisor, and the level of people that she works with, she always has to have the spouse there if there's a spouse, right? And so that's one of the first questions she asks. Hey, you have a partner? When can we sit down with them? And that's just so rote. She never even thinks about it, but that's an impactful question, right? So I think that's a really brilliant way to start with people. In terms of hanging out your shingle to take your professional competency, your skill, and then start consulting, help people understand what that journey looks like. In my case, right, I left a university position and started a company. I'm on company number 4. And that's real different than, hey, I'm a professional in a field. I've got some bandwidth available. I want to move into consulting. How do you get started doing that? And what were your first gigs like? And how did that kind of change your work schedule and life?
Yeah. So, I balance a lot. So, it's doing a podcast. My wife's an entrepreneur. I help her father-in-law out with his business a little bit, doing some consulting, and then still driving a sales team can be a lot. But a lot of it just came really organically through Instagram, where I started putting my content out there by way of YouTube, podcast, and then Instagram. And so people would follow me on there and start reaching out. Hey, I've got a small business. Can I meet with you? And so I said, sure. And then so that happened more and more. And then it got to the point where I worked in insurance space, but I do employee benefits. And so I'm oftentimes meeting with business owners, and I'm meeting with insurance brokers who own their own company as well. And so I'd start talking to the brokers because I was a broker for 8 years. And so I was a captive broker, so I couldn't sell multiple products. Right. So I'll just start asking them about their follow-up process, because I'll get a lot like, Ty, you're tenacious with your follow-up, but you're always providing me value. You're a great listener. I enjoy talking to you. And so I'll start talking to them. Where are you struggling right now? I kind of start to flip it organically, right. And then it'll ultimately lead into a conversation. And I remember the first lady that I ended up helping. She was in Florida, in Orlando. And she was, Ty, I'm really struggling with, hitting blah, 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 blah. She was interesting because, we're working for clients as well in a different capacity. And I go, well, talk to me about your follow-up process. And she goes, well, I got my whiteboard. And immediately I'm like, red flag, red flag, and so it just kind of started happening organically like that. And then, now I do a call to action on my podcast, which helps bring people in as well. So really, to be very transparent, because of my schedule, it's the people that I'll throw out there. But if they're not interested or whatnot, then I don't really pursue it because I don't have time. It's a lot of people that are coming to me saying that, hey, I know that you could help me. And I only like to take on three to 5 people at a time. And then we just schedule out, a half hour a week, where we can review metrics, struggles, conversations. It's really great, helpful having people record combos so that I can listen, we can go back and listen to it and talk and coach on it.
Yeah. Yeah. No. And listening to sales calls to me is the most, you learn so much about people's personalities and their dynamic by listening to them talk to prospects, or people who are even further down the funnel and kind of getting that. And what are the big things, like with us, we're a marketing firm, we help a lot of businesses. We've got a whole side hustle 6-day challenge thing for small businesses, honestly, for people who can't really afford our fees, to help them get started. And we see these same things over and over and over again that people do. The behavior's totally natural, but it's not really the most effective way to accomplish their goals, right? And when you come into your typical small business situation, I know follow-up, something you've mentioned, what are kind of the big things you see again and again that are just easy areas of improvement for people?
They just, 2 things right off the bat. One is they follow up the same way every single time. They're not mixing up as far as how they're leaving messages or how they're sending emails or how they're sending DMs. Here's a typical voicemail. Hey, Andy, this is Ty calling with XYZ company. I'd like to talk to you about my product. Give me a call back when you have some free time. Here's my phone number.
Right.
That results in 0 callbacks ever.
What if you do that same voicemail 6 times though, right? 6 times in a row.
Well, no, because Yeah, maybe that's what they do, right? And every single time I'm not providing any type of value or insight or compelling reason for anybody to call me back.
Right.
And so what I, really will develop a voicemail script. And my voicemail script is more like, "Hey Andy, this is Ty calling with XYZ company. The reason I was reaching out to you today was I recently had read a white paper that seemed like it would vibe well with your company. I wanted to get your thoughts and your insights on what the paper has to say. I'm going to shoot over to you in an email. I realize that you're busy, so I'm going to give you a call back next Tuesday at 3 p.m. If you want to
Right.
give me a call back before then, here's my number." So,
Mm-hmm.
right. So now I've set a different type of level of engagement. I've provided some insight. I'm asking for their feedback. I'm setting the expectation that I'm going to be the one following up.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going anywhere.
Right.
But if you want to call me back,
Right.
here's my number. And that, if anything, if people think that you're going to call back and then you do follow up and you do call back when you say you're going to,
Mm-hmm.
by the second or third call, then I'm like, shit, I just got to talk to this guy because I got to figure out what he wants.
Right. Or he's just not going to go away.
You know,
He's going to keep giving me value. I don't want that,
yeah, right. So,
Right.
so,
Oh,
so
man.
that's number one. And then the second thing is the average salespeople follow up less than 3 times.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
And statistically, it takes 5 to 12 times to hit your prospect for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
So you're leaving so much on the table when you go in and you start talking to people like, well, how many times did you follow up? Well, I followed up twice. It wasn't a good lead. Well, how do you know it
Right.
wasn't a good lead? You never talked to them.
Yep. Yep. And we see that all the time. We do lead generation for a bunch of different verticals, and you'll talk to the client and they'll go, "Oh, well, the salespeople say these leads aren't good. When are you calling them back?"
Right.
Well, we usually get to them within the first day or two. I was like, "Do me a favor. Tell everybody they got to call everybody back within an hour. Your contact rate is going to soar." And from the outside, you look at that and you go, "Well, that means the leads weren't really that interested." It's like, no. They're just like you. I tell people all the time, we'll be on the phone and maybe I've got a team member that I'm talking to about something, who lives remotely, and they'll say, whatever. And I'll be like, "Look, I promise you 100% I am going to forget what we just talked about in 10 minutes. Put it in an email and send it to me. If you don't hear from me in 48 hours, please bug me again." And we're all busy, and that follow-up, especially the type you're talking about, consistent, respectful, and always delivering value. I mean, that sounds like such a cliche to say now, but you're giving somebody something that's useful before you've entered in. Like, that's huge, right? And then to give up after 3 tries, like you're just getting started. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. One of the, I like telling the story because it puts it in perspective. But one of the biggest accounts that I had ever landed, I was lucky. I got a hold of this gentleman on the third call I'd made towards him, and we had a brief conversation. He kind of shunned me off, and yeah. Give me a call back next week when it's a better time. Sure. From that time on, I called him 17 more times without ever talking to him.
Wow.
But I had also dove into his organization. So I knew who his business partner was. I knew who the other influencers were. So I started attacking the other influencers just as viciously. I got a hold of the business partner. The business partner gave me the time of day. I provided value. I got him hooked. I drove the emotion. He reasoned with logic, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
that's how it usually works. So then he talked to the partner. So then I reached back out to the guy. I said, "Yeah, I know you talked to Marty. Yada yada yada. Sure, let's set a meeting." So we set a meeting. I delivered on the meeting. I showed them where we could help. I showed them where I thought they had some gaps in their business. So they gave me a shot at writing one of their pieces of business. It
Mm-hmm.
was a $500,000 piece of business. I did that, went well, and then from then on, we ended up writing another $4 million over the next 18 months.
Wow. That's awesome. Yeah. And so much of it is about just getting in the door to show people what you can do, you know?
Right.
Like, I don't know. I don't care what your business is, or if you're a roofer, you mow lawns or whatever. If you've got a great product and really great service, all you need is that opportunity. Let me show you, what we can do for you. And then from there, it just expands, right? And most of our contracts work the same way. Somebody will come on board for something small, and you take care of them, and you keep on listening, and you kind of go over and above, and before you know it, you're making $250,000, $300,000 a year, or $1 million a year off of them because they just kind of keep giving you more stuff. Yeah, I think that's super powerful. I think you, like a lot of people, juggle juggle a lot of different roles, right? You're a dad, you're a husband, you've got a day job, so to speak, you're doing the consulting gig. You've got to manage your brother's fly fishing habit, which I fully respect. But and take care of yourself, right? Fitness and, making sure you stay in shape. I'm guessing the last year was a real, you probably had a lot more flexibility and capability to deal with what happened during COVID in business than a lot of people. But talk a little bit about how you kind of manage your time and priorities as you're growing your business, but also managing all these other responsibilities. How do you do that? And then what was the last year like as you did that too?
Sure. So, for me, it's being really clear on what my goals are.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I start with my big overarching goals. I have, 5 goals that I cannot accomplish this year. They're ones that force me to continue to grow.
Right.
So I have to grow into my goals. But 2, they help me focus every day. So I write down my goals every day in the first person. So I write down my goals every single day. I'm a big fan of Grant Cardone, so I have a 10X planner that I use.
Right.
And then
I was going to say that's a Grant Cardone thing, right? Yeah. Right. The writing down. Yeah. I love that. Yeah, absolutely.
So I write down my goals every day, and then I assess my targets. I read that book, The One Thing.
Mm-hmm.
I forget who wrote it. I read it 6 years ago, and it was always really impactful because it was prioritize.
Right.
You should only do the things that are going to move you forward. Those are your non-negotiables. So I align my goals, my targets with my goals. So then I set up my targets. Usually they're 5 to 8 targets every single day that are non-negotiable that I attack first, and I have to do that. So it allows me, if my day goes sideways,
Right.
after lunch, or I've got fires I've got to put out, or I get pulled in different directions, or, I can't, my link's not working or something, crazy, right. But at least I've already know that what I've accomplished, I've propelled myself forward. And I time block just like everybody else, but I don't do large chunks of time. I break down my time blocking into 30 or 60 minutes. So,
Right.
Also like Cardone talks about, compressed time. When you compress time, it makes you work with a sense of urgency.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what a lot of salespeople do this too. They set themselves up for doing 3 or 4 hour call blocks.
Yeah.
All you're going to do is just distract yourself if you're trying to make calls for 3 hours. But if you make, hey, I'm going to do 30 calls in 30 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
well, that sets a whole different type of sense of urgency.
Yep.
So that's, really been the key for me, is being very clear on my goals, making sure that my targets are accomplished every day, hopefully by noon, and they align with my goals. And then I have a very strict morning routine. I'm up very early to make sure that I can get, my mind right. Doing gratitude, meditation. I do the Wim Hof breathing exercises,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'm in the gym 6 to 7 days a week.
Right. Well, and I think, we've talked about a lot of stuff. I think Gary Keller wrote The One Thing.
You're right.
And then, you've got guys like Grant Cardone. I mean, and you've got all these people out there, Anthony Iannarino, the Hyatt Group,
Mm-hmm.
who does the Full Focus Planner, all of that. And one thing that I tell people, long ago and far away, I owned a gym. That was my third business. And when people would come to me, it would be, oh, here's my goal or whatever. And you have to explain to them, look, I know this sounds like a cliche, but everybody's different. And you have got to, and different things work for different people. So if you try something and it doesn't work for you, then try something else. There is no one time management system. There's no one planner. There's no one whatever. Experience all of these ideas and think, okay, who do I resonate with, right?
Yes.
And then go from there. I think, like Grant Cardone's got unbelievable amount of free material out there, and his attitude and the way he approaches things, I think, is very appealing to certain people who have that kind of similar energy he's got. You take a guy like Anthony Iannarino, he's got a real different vibe. So in a way, he's kind of more cerebral in some ways, right?
Yeah.
He's got his very and we're going to have 4 90-minute periods a day and all that kind of thing. But you got to keep trying, and I love that idea. Over time, you develop your arsenal of tools that help you be effective. But this idea of growing into your goals, I think, is absolutely brilliant. And I've been thinking about this, especially with a project we're working on with one of our larger clients. And I said to them, "Hey guys, why don't we let's just follow the Elon Musk dictate now? Let's try and accomplish our 10-year plan in 6 months. Like, let's just go hard." And we probably won't get there, but by God, we're going to be a hell of a lot further along than if we try to accomplish our 6-month plan in 6 months. So I love that idea of growing into a goal. I think that's unbelievably smart, and just a brilliant way to look at things. So when you sit down and you plan out, what do? You plan out like a week, a month, a quarter, a year? How do you figure out for your own? I mean, sorry, now we're in an episode about time management instead of your sales consulting, but I love it.
No, it's all good.
Yeah. So what's your process there?
Well, it's going to vary from goal to goal, because some you might be able to achieve in 12 months. Like one of my goals. Well, I can tell you what we can read them off if you want.
Oh, nice. Yeah. All right. Going straight to the book.
So one of my goals was to become a vice president of sales for a large organization. I just accomplished that, so now I got to find one to replace that. But that was one of my goals.
Well done. Well done.
Thank you.
Wow, boy, you got that out of the way quick this year.
I know. Well, it's been on there for quite some time.
Gotcha.
So here's a 10-year goal, to have a net worth of $10 million by the time I'm 45. I just turned 37 yesterday.
Nice.
Okay, so that's a goal. So that forces me, okay, what are the vehicles I have to look at? So then it forces me to look at, I invest in crypto, I invest in real estate, I invest in index funds. So I try to have this diverse portfolio. Then I look and I review that monthly. Right. Yep. To make sure that I'm still tracking. My wife's a holistic nutritionist. So, she would really like to see me back to 185. Right now I'm 200 pounds. I know. I'm like, shit, I'm not in college anymore. I just turned 37. This is ridiculous.
It's like, how many French fries do I eat on this diet? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, right? Exactly. So right now I'm 200 pounds. And so my goal this is a year goal, is to get back to 185 where I was at my college life.
Right. Yeah.
If I can accomplish that, I would like to own 100 doors by the time that I'm 45. So that's another stretch goal.
Yep.
Right now we're at 3, so I got some work to do.
Just a few left.
Work to do there.
Just a few.
Few left. But I feel like it's one of those things that I'll start to snowball. I kind of already have in my mind that if I get to 3, where we're at right now, then next year I can get to 10.
Right.
If I can get to 10, right, then I can use that income. And you've seen Cardone, and when I started listening to him, he was only worth $700 million in real estate. But within, but
not even trying. He wasn't even trying at that point, right?
Yeah, exactly. But in the last 2 years, you've watched him go from 700 million to 2.1 billion, right? Because it just starts to, like anything, once you compound interest or anything, once you start to have the multiplier and you can start to scale, it gets easier to get those things. And then lastly is to have a global podcast with averaging 1 million downloads for a year. So about 100,000 a month.
Yeah.
So that's another goal. So I'm global. I think my podcast has hit 64 different countries so far. So I would say that's global. So now we're just working on the download piece. And so then I strategically put out, omnipresent on social media, and I have a content calendar. I use another planner for that, where I plan out my content every day, specific talking points, and that will kind of help to grow that vehicle. So those are my 5 goals that I'm working on right now.
Something that I find really interesting and is sort of how this podcast started. I was down at a friend's house down in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. I'm in the mountains in Southern Virginia. And we were sitting around, and we're like, he's got this huge, like 5-acre front yard. We're sitting around a giant fire pit. There are probably 15, 20 people sitting around, every one of them a business owner. And we're all just kind of shooting the shit and so on and so forth. And I thought, man, what a fascinating group of people, right? Everybody around that fire is multi-talented. They do what they do. We had one guy who's a big VC guy. My buddy runs a software firm. We had another guy who sells like emergency equipment to fire stations and all this kind of jazz. He's also an EMT and a fireman and all that kind of jazz. And one of the things we ended up talking about, and it's one reason I wanted to tell those stories, right? I mean, everybody wants to interview a Grant Cardone or a Sarah Blakely or Elon Musk. But I was like, let's interview people who are out there in the world who are like aspirationally in your sights, like, oh, okay, I could emulate them. But long story short, looking at the goal stuff, I don't know any entrepreneurs who are not interested in a lot of different things. Right. It's, I invest, everybody, we all at one point go, ooh, real estate. That's pretty interesting. Right. And then we kind of do that. You're thinking about fitness or hobbies or skills that you want to do. You talked about your brother fly tying. I love to fly fish. I live in fly fishing nirvana here in the Blue Ridge Mountains. So believe me, I got a whole room in there full of fly tying stuff. So I totally get that. But,
oh, awesome.
I think not being afraid to go ahead and own the fact that you've got a lot of stuff you want to accomplish, and then don't be scared of that. Grow into that. It's like, well, maybe if I try to do this, I can't watch my 3 hours of Netflix every night. It's like, yeah, newsflash, you're not going to miss it. You're better off.
Right.
Yeah. Get up early, do the thing. Okay. Oh, I did gratitude journaling for a month. I didn't like it. Great. Don't do it anymore. But that doesn't mean don't get up early. Right. So, figure out, handle your business, man. But I think people kind of feel like they have to focus monomaniacally on stuff. It's just not true. And it makes you kind of boring, to be honest with you. You're no fun at parties to talk to if all you do is worry about one thing. You know what I mean?
Right. I don't understand that type of mindset, to be honest with you. And people ask me all the time, they're like, well, how do you do it? I'm like, well, how do you not? Yeah. Like, it's so cliche to say, but I was talking to my dad yesterday, and about turning 37, and he's a really fascinating guy. And he goes, well, at your age, I was divorced and living on a tent down at the river. So he's like, you're doing much better than me. But when people hit me with that question, I'm like, you don't know how many days you have left.
Right.
I might die at 38. And so, like, I don't know. And so, the question, well, there's two things. One, I've got a couple tattoos, but here in Gaelic, it says every day. And that's because it's to remind myself every day I need to be a little bit better. Mm-hmm. And the other question I ask myself often when I go to sleep is, did today matter?
Right. Yeah.
And it should. And so it's just like, I want my day to be full of stuff that I enjoy doing and people that I love being around. And I want to create as many memorable experiences for myself and my kids and my wife as humanly possible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And life is going to be hard enough without, it's going to throw challenges and setbacks at you all the time. And if you're just kind of sitting there, I hate to put it this way, but if you're just being a victim and you're not taking control of your time and the things you spend your energy on, I think it puts you in a really, you can get in a real dark place. And I think that made it really hard for a lot of people I know to make it through the last year. I've had two acquaintances / friends that were COVID-related suicides because their businesses failed. And you look at that and you think, man, just to feel that dark and that bleak, what a horrible place to be. And I can't help but think, part of having a lot of different goals and a lot of different interests is, hey, if something gets shut down for a while, I can go over here and I can concentrate on this, and this can be my bright light for a while I struggle with this other thing, right? And that's life. And to come back to sales, that's sales, right? You have months where you get skunked, man. You just do. So is there some other metric? Is there some other KPI I can watch and look at while I'm just getting my ass handed to me on cold calling or whatever, right? I think that stuff, and obviously you and your wife have thought about it, because I bet your kids are probably tiny little entrepreneurial lunatics already, right? Interested in doing stuff all the time and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and we like force them into it, and to a certain extent. We're like, my 6-year-old, he saved $257 last year, which he was very proud of.
Wow,
but
that's great.
I want them to build a great relationship with money, because that's where a lot of the people's their value comes from, something that doesn't actually have value, other than what we make it. Yep. But he's 6. He's in rock climbing. They do karate. He's already had 3 seasons of baseball. I just coached his first basketball season. He's played 3 seasons of soccer. So we have them going and exploring and doing this stuff. What do you like? What do you don't like? We're not just shoving a tablet in their face, right, and put them in front of a screen. And so, we're we're helping them try to design a life to see, the one thing my father did do very well was he always told me that you can do anything with your life.
Right.
And we were lower middle class and we didn't have any money. I put myself through college and stuff, but I never had this limited belief system that I couldn't accomplish anything because of my start. And like you're saying with the victimhood right now, and it's really being perpetuated, that you can't do something because of XYZ, or you
Right.
can't accomplish something because of XYZ. It's just not true.
Right.
It all has to start here. And so that's, one of the reasons why I'm on a mission to do so much and to touch people and to help people, because where I came from, I saw drugs, I saw addiction, I saw
Right.
crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And it's you can do anything you want if you just pick
Yeah.
yourself up and you go get after it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of very real stuff out there. I mean, clinical depression is no joke. People are in, horribly unfortunate circumstances. But even in spite of all of that, or maybe because of all of that, again, the freedom that you have here in your mind, in your head, is the only freedom you can always own. And if you're not working to develop that freedom and develop that all the time in whatever way, you are basically just going to continue to get kind of pushed around, and you can never improve your circumstances. And I think it's a tough message, and it's a message strangely a lot of people don't really want to hear today, which I find very fascinating. And I don't even mean that from the standpoint of, people need to quit being weak, but more, you would think the idea that, hey, you can take control of some of this stuff. And maybe the options available to you and the freedoms available to you aren't with somebody else, but you could have more next week and more the week after that and more the week after that. You just have to have goals and something to work towards, right?
100%. Yeah, you have to just start to drill down and define what your purpose is.
Yeah.
And there's a great exercise I went through, and it was Dean. What's his name? I'm drawing a blank on his last name. He works with Tony Robbins all the time. The real estate guy.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. But anyway, he went through this whole exercise of, asking yourself, like, what's your big overall arching goal? Maybe it's to make $100,000. Maybe it's to be more spiritual. Maybe it's to have a better relationship with your wife, whatever it is.
Right.
But ask yourself why. And you're going to get a surface answer. And you ask yourself, well, why? And you go through that process 7 times. It allows you to get real clear about why, because if you don't understand your purpose and your mission, it's hard. You can write goals down on the paper all day long, but you're not going to accomplish them.
Right. Yeah. I think a lot of people have goals, in air quotes, that they don't really care about, because they feel like they ought to or whatever. And it's crazy. So I drive a 18-year-old now, Yukon XL. And that's got, I don't know how many 100,000 miles on it. And everybody's like, gosh, dude, when are you going to get another truck? I'm like, I don't know, when this one just falls apart around me. It's not a thing I care about. I've owned nice sports cars and whatever, and that's cool. And if you're into my wife just bought a new ride, and she was super excited to buy a Benz, and it was like great. And it's like, whatever your goal is, if you're emotionally invested in it, you're going to want to persist and pursue. And if you're not emotionally invested in it, you're not going to care. So I think you're absolutely, sit down and like, why do I want this? Why do I care about this? Keep asking again and again. That's a brilliant, absolutely brilliant piece of advice. I really like that. Unbeknownst to the audience, we began this episode with epic technical difficulties, and Ty fought through to make it through here onto Discord. So I do want to respect your time because you got a lot going on. But all of this is the warm-up to the 2 most important questions known to humankind. We're going to ask them to you now. No pressure. But this will be your thoughts preserved for history forever. So don't be worried at all. So here you go. If you could give advice to somebody just starting out in business on their own, regardless of what they're doing, and you could give them one key piece of advice to you, what would you tell them? What does it mean, and why would you tell them that?
Just double down on your skill set. Too many people get into too many people get into either an entrepreneur, get into sales. I don't care if you're in human resources, whatever it is, become the best at it, or become the best version of yourself at that. One of my biggest fears is not ever maxing out on my full potential. And my full potential may never be to be a Grant Cardone, right? It may like an Ed Milet. I don't care. I just want to be the best version of me. And that starts with me showing up every day at work and giving
Mm-hmm.
150%. So if you want to be the best HR person, go listen to an HR podcast, get HR
Yeah.
books, be the best at what you do and really own it.
I love that. And I think, too, especially for business owners, a lot of people get started. Maybe they're a graphic designer. I'm going to open an agency. And that notion of doubling down on your skills is going to change over time. You're going to start, okay, I'm going to do a lot of graphics. And then, well, wait a minute, if I want to grow, I've got to be better at marketing so I can outsource that. But now I'm a manager of a business. I'm an owner. Like, that's a set of skills, right? I mean, and you got to double down on that when that's your season of life, right? And then you kind of move and grow. And I think that's absolutely on the money. When I started our first agency back in 1997, 98, we didn't have any employees. And then all of a sudden, 3 years later, I've got like 14 employees and we've got the whole floor of a building and all this. And I'm a just shitty manager, it turns out, right? So, I mean, just awful, So all of a sudden, I've got to kind of figure out how to, so, you double down on that. I like that. The idea of doubling down on what it is that's going to get you to that next stage and really concentrate on focusing on that in the interest of, okay, how can I push myself? How hard can I go? How good can I get? I love that. And again, right, the comparison with the people who you admire is not, oh, I need to be them. It's, hey, I admire a lot of stuff about them and they're going to help me be a better me. Right.
Yes.
I think that's huge. I am worried that I might already know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it to you anyway, because this is the other one for all the marbles. If you could share a meal with any living public figure, who would it be? Why? And what meal would you have?
That is a great question. Jesus, only one person?
Only one. Only one.
This will probably surprise some people, but I would probably have to say the Dalai Lama.
I love it.
And
oh, yes. All right, go. I'm not going to say best answer we've had on the podcast so far, but it's the best answer we've had on the podcast so far. All right. So tell me.
And I love sushi, so I'd probably just say, man, let's just crush some rolls. And
nice.
It just because for me, because business is great, making money is great, owning real estate is great, all that is great. But at the end of the day, I'm a very spiritual person. You can't really see, but at my forums here, I've got Ganesh. Here, I've got Buddha. Here, I've got
nice.
prayer hands. I think that they're all just the same vehicle trying to get to the same place. And
right.
Life is about loving. Life is about giving. To the community of Earth, to people around you. And so I love talking to people who are spiritually enlightened and are just on a different level than I am, because it keeps me humble and it keeps me grounded. And that's just someone I would love to have a conversation with.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And, there's a great story I tell about him to people, and I've had occasion to tell it. He was being interviewed by, I think, a reporter in England, and talking about when he had really first kind of taken on the adult version of his role as the Dalai Lama. An older monk came to him and had these like yoga poses. It was like, hey, do you think this yoga style would be really good for my path to enlightenment? And the Dalai Lama looked at that, and this guy was pretty old and was looking at the poses, and like they were super hardcore difficult. And he said to the guy, hey, I think, yes, these are good, but, you're a little further along in life and maybe not for you, right? Trying to be kind and say, hey, you don't worry about this. And then the guy went and took his own life a couple days later in an effort to come around again so he could do this, right? And so the reporter says, and the Dalai Lama is telling the story. I watched the interview. I was like, oh my God. And the reporter's like, oh, wow, how did you get over that? And the Dalai Lama said something that has struck me and stuck with me ever since I saw that. He said, that's the problem with people in the West. You believe you need to get over things. He's like, I will remember that for the rest of my life, and I use what I've learned there in all of my dealings with other people, and I will always wish that I had done things differently, but we incorporate that and we move on. And talk about having your mind blown. I was just stunned at that. So to sit down with somebody that far along the path of self-awareness and spiritual development would be huge. And I think sushi is exactly the right meal. That's fantastic. Yeah. What a presence. What an amazing presence he's been. Well, hey, I don't want to keep you any longer. I appreciate you making the time. Everybody, again, this is Ty Evans, and Ty will wrap up, but stay on with me for just a little bit. You can find him at tyzerevans.com, TyzerEvans.com, and on social media and on Instagram. Apparently, you're a big magnet for new clients, so hopefully people will find you there. Really encourage you to check out his stuff, and if you are a small business, especially if you're just getting started and looking to come into this year as things open back up, I would encourage you to talk to somebody about getting better at your sales skills. So absolutely get in touch with Ty, have a conversation and see what he can do to help you. I think that's a great idea. And thanks again for listening, everybody. This has been the How I Make Money podcast. I'm your host, Andy Beadle, and we will see you next week. Thanks for joining us. You can find contact information about our guest in the show notes for this episode. This has been the How I Make Money podcast by Brand Distillers. To learn more, visit branddistillers.com.